Hi, I'm Tod Langley, the CEO of Crisis Response Leader Training, CRLT, and we are back for another episode on our podcast series from the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training Annual Conference at the ALERRT in Nashville, Tennessee. And we have had, again, an outstanding opportunity to meet even more professional, experienced, and qualified people that share the same passion that CRLT does, which is really about saving innocent people's lives through training, preparation, education. And we got fortunate enough to meet, our next two guests. And so I want to turn it over to them for a brief introduction of who they are and a little bit about their backgrounds. If you don't mind starting, Bridgett.
My name's Bridgett Enloe, and I am 30 years in fire service paramedic, former law enforcement, currently a nurse at this time. And my background is I was at the Fort Hood shooting in 2009, and then I was a medic in the warm zone at Santa Fe High School in 2018.
Yeah, so we'll definitely ask some of your lessons learned from those tragic events because you have a very unique experience, and we'll certainly share whatever you'd like to talk about. Mm-hmm. But it's for me very much a pleasure and an honor to get a chance to know you. So thank you. And Jason.
Jason Mitchell. I'm 21 years with the Pasadena Police Department, and I was paramedic as well, and did EMS prior to going into law enforcement. But I've kept my paramedic all these years. And I'm currently the health and risk mitigation officer with the city, and handle all the injuries, accidents, all the analysis and risk mitigation for those things.
Great. And both of you guys are affiliated directly with ALERRT. So you're here not just as attendees, but you also have a training education role. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with that?
Go ahead.
I'm presenting here. My presentation's on tactical medicine and how to build those teams, your tactical medical teams, using them not just for the benefit of the department, but also the community as a whole, especially given the kind of the anti-police rhetoric and the things that are going on right now. It's a tool to push out to the community and show the community that, a different side of law enforcement, if you will, where you're using your medical assets to push out Stop the Bleed, or some of the alert-based courses like CRACE and some of those things. And so you're touching the community and giving them a different experience, if you will. And I'm also an instructor with ALERRT, air instructor, CRACE instructor, and different things such as that. And so it's ALERRT's, again, the national standard for how we respond to active shooter events, but the courses they put out are very well thought out, and I'm actually honored to be a part of that organization.
And it also sounds like some of that is really good at community outreach and understanding and education. What better way to unite everybody in the community behind our responders than to save our children's lives, particularly and certainly I keep talking about active shooters if it only happens in a school. And it does, and it's very tragic, but it also happens in workplaces, places of worship, outdoor venues. There's a lot of different locations where it has the potential for happening. And if we don't do a better job of cooperating at our first responder to community, levels, then certainly we don't want that to end up as being even more tragedy because we couldn't get the chance to do our jobs right. And part of that, Bridgett, is that you are very focused on some resiliency stuff, aren't you?
Absolutely. So this year I'm speaking on how to move forward through resilience. My topic is So I Was Resilient, Now What? And it delves into how healing and the resiliency process is not a linear transition, that there's no expiration date on healing.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of, it was interesting even in the opening comments, one of the things that Dr. Pete Blair talked about was the resilience and what it means to, when it starts, and it carried over, I think, even in Carly Posey's discussion from the I Love You Guys Foundation is, that resiliency and what it means to recovery starts at the time of the crisis, but it can take a very long time to go through, and sometimes it's something that's with you, in changing your life for the rest of the time you're here. So it's definitely an added benefit to learn from you on that as well. So those are our guests for the day, and that's the kind of the background that they have to share with us as we talk about a particular scene. Just like in our other podcast, what I'd like to demonstrate is what are we using as a backdrop for our discussion. So we're using CRLT's The Incident simulation, which is primarily designed to understand the foundational level terminology and policies and procedures that are utilized for best practices. So it's a way to educate responders and faculty members on ALERRT and other best practices out there, like the standard response protocols and reunification plan, those type of things. Its focus is really mostly geared towards incident command responsibilities for requesting and staging assets and ensuring that the overall scene is handled as efficiently as possible. And then also it's utilized for the interagency or multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional response for large-scale incidents, what it means to doing community outreach so that everybody's kind of on the same sheet of music. So that's kind of the purpose of the simulation and why we put it together. What we have here is our demonstration level, and we've set it up in a particular way, and Bridgett and Jason haven't really seen it yet, is I'm going to give them just a brief description of what has happened so far in the incident, and we're not really going to control the simulation that much. We're just using that to talk over a particular part. So I'm just going to kind of, give you a brief overview of what you're looking at, and then I'm just going to ask you guys from your perspectives, what's going through your mind? What are some of the experiences that you've had, or what are some of the training things that you've learned about that you would want to press upon people? So I'll just start off with that. So inside, what we had is a report to dispatch of an active shooter incident at a middle school. There were multiple shots fired, and they have listed that there are numerous victims. There was a school resource officer on the premises, and about 30 seconds to a minute after the incident occurred, he was able to report to dispatch that he had a suspect under custody. He had taken a weapon away, was put off to the side. Now we also know that the first responders that arrived onto the scene, a couple more police officers able to put on extra protective equipment. They had a helmet, tactical vest, and a rifle. They've moved in, and they've secured the immediate area around that police officer with the suspect, and there are some wounded around him right now, kind of in a classroom wing. We know that there's a hallway, there's some classrooms at the end, and we're staged right outside of that kind of wing of those classrooms. So we think we've got 3 officers inside right now. We've got multiple victims, and we have another officer here that's kind of ready to go in. You see an officer that, I'll pan around a little bit so you can see on there, he's got a pistol. He has established himself as what some people call the 5th man or the tactical command. So he is there as the shift sergeant of patrol that was there, came on the scene, and he is ready to take over tactical command of everything that's going to go inside of the building. We also had fire and rescue. A pump truck came onto scene, and they staged, and they were prepared to go in, and they've assigned themselves to be rescue task force. So we've got a mass casualty bag with that squad leader, or whatever you might call the pump truck leader. He is there and ready to coordinate with the tactical commander. 2 of his crewmen are with him, and they've left 1 with the pump truck in case it had to be repositioned. That one's also working a little bit of crowd control to start moving some of the victims at least away from the initial staging area so that we can have good flow. And then I'll move it out just a little bit so you can see a little bit more of the scene. And from there, here we are with them. You can see off the right-hand side, this is the initial response where all the tactical teams set up. Some ambulances have arrived on scene, and here's our original pump truck. But for our medics that arrived, they're not really sure what they're allowed to do. So we've got some of that to consideration of that whole hot to warm to cold zone thing. Mm-hmm. And we don't know if they're going to be allowed in or not. And that's kind of one of those things about what's the makeup of our rescue task force? How many is enough? How much security do we have? Do they have the right amount of equipment? Are we going to do a patient transfer? All those kind of questions, could come up. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys off that, and I'm just going to center it back on that rescue task force staging area. And let's talk about what are some of the things going through your mind.
One of the most important things that we try to push out to our officers that are going to be assigned, if you will, to a rescue task force. Those RTF concepts, the only way it works is if that officer or those officers stay with that team. They don't leave. If another incident starts to spin off in a different area of the facility that they happen to be at, they don't leave that team. They are tied at the hip, and the reason that is because these firefighters or the EMS personnel, don't necessarily have the ability to protect themselves. Moreover, if you leave them, what sort of, from the psyche standpoint of it, how does that make them feel? Now they feel, any possible things, bad outcomes could happen without the law enforcement protection there. And so the stressing to our officers that it is your responsibility to protect that team, and you do not leave that team, period, end of story, is paramount.
So some of that feeling of isolation or even breakdown of communication, because we don't even know if, based on the response, if they're volunteers or if they're from the same agency, are they on the same net? So this might be one of those critical stages where that communication flow off of radios maybe hasn't been worked out all the way. So does that also make sense from that perspective? Makes
perfect sense, and that's why you want your unified commands. You want your law enforcement, your fire department, your EMS all standing side by side, so that unified command, those commanders can be disseminating information, disseminating where they need to be. Mm-hmm. And they're all those three entities are standing next to each other, communicating amongst themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's a key thing to this system working. And one of the things that I believe that this program does is it sort of stresses the importance of that, and it also it kind of exposes the importance of everybody kind of being on the same page and understanding, at minimum, the lingo, the definitions, the verbiage being used. So RTFB is an example. If I have volunteer EMS service or fire department that's never been through this training of any sort, are they going to know what an RTF is? And the importance of pushing out those concepts. And that's one of the good things that I can see this particular product offering.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Bridgett, do you have any initial comments on this perspective?
Yeah, it's the communication thing. Especially in a rural setting, you're going to have agencies responding from many different areas. So the possibility of you working or being on an RTF with the law enforcement agency that you're not familiar with, it takes just a couple of seconds of, hey, my name is Bridgett, your name is, and stick with me, I'm going to stick with you. Just some short, clear, concise directions before you enter the building. And then when you come out of the building, it also helps is like when you go to that reunification part, you know who was in the room with you. And it gives you that ability to follow up in your after action. I was
going to say the exact same thing. You brought up a couple of things, and for the viewers, every single show I don't talk about my background, but I was in the military for a significant amount of time, special operations with about 11 and a half years of combat. And even before that, before we went into combat, one of the biggest premises we had was the battle buddy. And the battle buddy was the person that really kind of looked after you and almost everything. Because, in stressful environments or when you're tired or, whatever the situation may be, you put all those things together and you cannot pay attention to everything. There's just too many sensory things going on. And you need to divide up that kind of workspace and that workflow. So it's kind of the thing of, I got your back. So part of that also is that, okay, I got your back, and that allows me to get through the situation awareness of, and I know from your background some of the things of like, I'm walking down the hallway and I'm kicking canisters. And certainly I would encourage anybody to really take an opportunity to learn when you meet Bridgett, is to learn from your experiences, because there are so many things that we can learn from that. But, the situational awareness of walking down the hallway and having somebody with you, and you can divide up that workflow, that's extremely important. But we're also talking about what it means from the after-action review, which is how do we share information of what we learned together to put all that back together so that I remember that, I remember that. Okay, what would we have done differently? What could we have done better? Or what did we do well? But then long-term, I think also is that battle buddy is extremely important too, right?
Right. And the battle buddies, you'll find that you keep in touch with them even after an incident. So if you miss out on that 5 seconds of introductions, or even stopping to see what agency they're with, because you're like, oh, they were dressed in green, or they were dressed in black, or they were dressed in blue, well, that's every one of us out there. So just that quick introduction allows you I'm going to have more buy-in with you if I know who you are. If I know your name, that makes now our team is personable, because I know, okay, well, Todd's got my back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move just a few because I think we talked a good about the staging of what it means to just being prepared to go in. But let's now assume that we are going to have to make a movement into, and this is probably not the best practice. We're only doing it for demonstration purposes. But let's say we have at least a assigned person to move in. We know that the immediate area has been locked down. So I would say that, we've got the main suspect. So we could at least say that hot is probably the warm, but we've got a lot of pushing out to do with the back clearance. Back clearance has not taken place, but we know that we have multiple injuries inside that have to get in. So somebody made a decision we're moving in. So we're going to go ahead and say that our security is going to go ahead and move interior to guide you guys in. And what I'm going to do is move these guys in real quick just so we can say, okay, now what is going through your mind? And I'll just take it from there. So here it is that our first security for our rescue task force, and the rest of the guys would be moving in. I don't want to take time to bog it down while we're having a great discussion. But here it is. This is what they've been presented with as they come right into what was that original hot zone. So here it is. I've got my school resource officer with a suspect in custody, and I've got an initial security down the hallway. I've got one other officer that went into a room. Let me see if I can find him.
Understood.
Yep. So here he is. He's kind of coming into this area, and he's checking back out. He's going to maybe open this other door and start. He's going to continue to clear to make sure that the rest of the area is, open and that there's no immediate threats. And here we are right back to our first part of our rescue task force. And I can see already I've got 2 casualties here, and I can kind of see through that doorway I've got another casualty there. What is the primary job of our rescue task force?
Stop the bleed, because we've already stopped the killing, so we want to stop the dying process. So doing a quick and concise and quality triage of the patients in the room, whether they're victims, patients, and then assigning personnel, whether it be some of the officers that came in can also put on tourniquets, the medical personnel can put on tourniquets, and then knowing what resources you're going to need on the outside at your casualty collection point, and then having your, in ALERRT we use the term room boss, have them being able to communicate what you need on the outside, so it's very fluid to get patients to the ultimate. What we want to do is make sure they get to an operating room or a hospital theater where they can go in and see a surgeon, and that's where they're going to get the healing from.
Yeah, and what I'm curious for you is in this situation with the fire and rescue, and in Indianapolis is an example for me having the chance to talk with the chief of EMS and fire for the city. Is that probably about 70% of firemen are EMT, and really about 80% of their call outs are non-fire suppression, and they have to be able to respond to something like this. So they're fairly well trained and equipped to handle that. When you guys go in, is it typically would you have a complete mass casualty bag, or do you have individual first aid kits that you also carry?
We go in with one bag, and we keep everything
centralized for it to be able to pull from? Okay.
Right, because it keeps the weight down, so you can move as one unit when you're going down hallways and entering rooms. And the other is the more equipment you have, the more chance you have of leaving something behind or losing it. Do you see the same?
Right, and so from the law enforcement standpoint, we're teaching our guys to have a go bag, so that when you are sent to this sort of situation, you're grabbing not just your rifle and the tools to go stop the killing part, but that you have a go bag of some sort so you can stop the dying part. So conceptually, go in, whatever that threat happens to be, take care of that threat. That's the stop the killing part. So there's not more of that going on. So that being done, well, the secondary aspect of that is the stop the dying part, which is, again, the medicine. And so if you, as an example, you sustain an injury to your femoral artery, you're looking at roughly 2 minutes before you're dead.
Right.
You bleed out your entire blood volume. Well, it's going to take way more than that, way longer than that for EMS and fire to get there and come into that building. And so it's important from the law enforcement standpoint, we teach our officers to apply tourniquets or to apply chest seals, the immediate stuff to sustain them that much longer until we can get them to definitive care. And so we have those go bags. We get in there. We're able to slap on tourniquets if they need to. We're able to run through and do an assessment, a bath assessment, which is, again, a concept that's taught by ALERRT. But do those assessments within 30 seconds so you can address the immediate issues, the immediate life-threatening issues. And, again, sustain them that much longer till EMS and fire can come in the room and then ultimately get them out of that building into definitive care.
Unless you probably had a lot of awareness or cooperation with the location you're going into. So let's say in this one it's the school. How important would it be for them to have Stop the Bleed pre-positioned kits or additional personnel with training on site?
I think it's very important. We're seeing a lot of schools actually have Stop the Bleed kits, like they have AEDs now. And a lot of teachers, I believe in Santa Fe, all their teachers have to go through a Stop the Bleed class before they're allowed to teach. So but you have to know where those resources are in order to use them. But that's one of the things is having everybody on every level educated, which is one of the benefits of your program, it puts everybody on that same level of knowing how to stop the dying.
Again, thanks. So the viewers will also know within our simulation, what we took is the American College of Surgeons report on morbidity and casualties from mass attack, active shooter situation in the United States. It was published in 2019, and it really covers data over about a 15 to 20 year period, if I remember correctly. And it addresses based on the most likely weapon to be used by percentage, whether it's a handgun, rifle, or shotgun. And then it will also talk about the most likely wounding location and what it means to the severity of that wound and what the morbidity, most likelihood is of those in comparison to the possibly preventable deaths. And one thing that we've ingested in there is all of those, and I think it's about 72 wounding variations based on what goes into the variables, what the weapon that was used, how many are most likely to be injured per incident, and that kind of thing. And so a lot of it to me is that the awareness of it's not going to be pretty, certainly, and you have to be prepared for understanding what that means to your triage process of, in most likelihood of headshot to chest shot to abdomen to extremity. For moral, it's going to be very quick, and I've got to be able to react. In comparison to an arm, which may be very painful, but may have got more time to react, and it's a simple tourniquet. But it also goes into what I found is, what's the training capacity of the people that can help me? Can I teach everybody to do a hemostatic control agent or a pack the wound compared to an occlusive dressing of a chest seal? So I don't have tension pneumothorax and those type of things developing compared to a tourniquet, right? So I think it's a little bit more complex than we assume, or we've pushed too much on tourniquet, whereas we also have to make sure we're doing a lot of hemorrhage controlling. But those things are programmed in there into the simulation, and we don't really in the simulation and with our advisors, we don't tell you what right looks like. We're giving you the scenario and letting you adopt based on your training capacity, your equipment, and your own response plan. We're letting you develop what is best for you in your situation. So that's kind of what it would look like. So I think we really addressed some really key things here, and I certainly appreciate it. And I think, what I would ask each of you is, with the time you have with the viewers, what we'll have is, what would be one key takeaway that you would like for them to come away from your own experiences?
Parking. So staging apparatus. It's very easy to get into the scene, but you have to. Everybody will circulate or kind of zone in on that immediate entry point where all the police officer cars are, fire trucks, ambulances. But you have to be able to get those ambulances out. And that's one thing that we've seen is people with well-intentions show up, they park anywhere that there's an available space, and it prevents the ambulances from getting out.
Yeah, so flow in and out for sure, and what that means to staging. And, you know, I know that through a lot of things they'll talk about the medical branch and what that means, but part of that really goes into the incident commander's responsibility of the perimeter. So what is my inner perimeter doing to lock down the situation so it doesn't expand? But what's my outer perimeter doing to control the traffic flow coming into it and going out of it again? So I think that's extremely important, yeah. And I just showed a brief example of that, and that was just the immediate responders. You can imagine, and we're in simulation time of only 1.5 to 2 minutes. That's kind of fast. That's extremely fast. You can imagine what this is going to look like in about 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. How about you, Jason?
Well, it's important on the takeaways with this particular program. This allows administrators, the commanders, those individuals who are tasked with deploying assets, with, as you were saying, the outside perimeter, being able to have proper staging set up, having those staging officers that are there, and getting the personnel together to form additional RTFs, and having all of those resources set aside, available, ready to go. And this allows the commanders the chance to practice, if you will, all those deployments and different things without having to spend these huge dollar amounts in an actual exercise.
It gives you the platform to create that muscle memory, because when you get put into an incident, you're going to fall back onto your training. Whether you train a little bit or a lot, whatever the level that you train to is going to be the level that you perform at under stress. So this program is great that volunteer departments can do it, school people can do it, and it lets us know as first responders, the school people have an idea of what we do, so we can utilize them as resources as well in an event that something happens.
Again, I really do appreciate it. I couldn't have asked you for more on the input side. You know, what we really want to do from a company perspective is make education and awareness better across the community, whether it's your first responders, your city leadership, or the faculty, or even parents. And then we also want them to all come into the same conclusion of what is needed to make it better. And I think that we need to have greater awareness and better responsibility as just citizens. We need to take a more active role in what we're doing to support our responders, and we need to give them the money they need to train. That's just my thing that I'll definitely going to add in there right now. We are not doing what we need to do in our American society to help out our responders in that aspect. But with the simulation itself, what we tried to do is design in a way that any organization can have it. We're not a traveling roadshow where you've got to have a lot of labor and consultants and subject matter expertise and trucks full of equipment. This is designed to be on a laptop that maybe has a gaming graphics card in it, and any department can have this. Any school can have it. And it can also be tailored to have your own property into the simulation, so you're not just training on foundational level on a generic simulation level, you're doing your own properties. So that is our intent of what we think we can do to help out and save time, save money. But you know, on that, I kind of want to segue in as we go into conclusion. You guys are really moving forward in a lot of different things. You have your own profession, your own career that you are a part of. You're also part of the ALERRT family, where you're instructors and promoting things in conjunction with the ALERRT, but you're also the founders of the Warrior's Way. And I think that is a phenomenal thing. And I would just like for you guys to share a little bit about what it is you're doing on that front.
Warrior's Way Foundation. A couple years ago, Bridgett and I were discussing, based again on her experiences with Santa Fe and some of the shortfalls there, trying to come up with a concept to help our first responder community and our military veterans with these critical incidents. And in discussion, we've talked about that. Bridgett brought up the fact that recovery resiliency isn't a linear process, and some days are good, some days are bad. And how can we, as an organization, Warriors Way, help those individuals deal with those incidents, deal with the stressors that come with that? And so conceptually, we want to bring 4 to 6 individuals out, have a curriculum over the course of a week. We partner with ranches, and either a dude ranch or a guest ranch, something along those lines. Bring them out and spend a week free of charge to those individuals, and bring them out and do some curriculum 2 to 4 hours a day. The rest of the time they're enjoying the mountains or whatever happens to be there. They're fly fishing, horseback riding, all the things that go with that. But expose them to what peer-to-peer can be, where you're sitting there talking through the issues with someone who's been there, done that, whether they're fellow law enforcement, whether they're former military, and you're able to talk to, again, a peer who's been there and done that, and share those experiences, so that whether it's a firefighter, a police officer, EMS, military veteran, they can realize that, hey, I'm normal, and everyone reacts to an abnormal situation in the similar ways. And so it normalizes their experience, it normalizes the way they're feeling, and it normalizes their stressors, so that they don't feel like they're the only ones that understand, and that they're not the only unicorn in the forest, if you will. And so that they're able to work through those issues with their battle buddy, like we talked about. Mm-hmm. And over the course of that week, we give them the tools to do that in a peer-to-peer setting. And then at the end of the week, we want to hand off information on, hey, if you want to seek out counseling, if you want to seek out therapy, here are some services that are available in your area. And what we will do is we're going to vet those, so that we're not, hey, here's some information on this particular therapist, and they're a marriage counselor, not a true post-traumatic stress type of therapist. Mm-hmm. We don't want to send them to that type of incident, because, like with Bridgett's story, she ran through 6 counselors, therapists, before she found the 7th that worked for her.
And that was just my first year after
Mm-hmm.
my incident. So,
and so we want to make sure that we're sort of vetting those services that are out there, and then when at the end of that week, we provide that person with the resources that are available in their area, where they're from, and allow them to seek out further counseling therapy should they want to, and then follow up with them. Hey, how things going? And ultimately, the goal is we want those individuals to come back and share their story with another group of individuals and facilitate a week. And so that we're building on that foundation and just helping each other work through our normal processing mm-hmm. issues of a stressful, abnormal situation.
Now, some of this tied in with, and maybe it's a little bit unique, are you doing some things with horses and some equine therapy as well?
Yes. So what we do, it's not we don't have licensed counselors or therapists there, because we all know how none of us like to talk to traditional counselors with clipboards. So we pair veterans and first responders with horses, and we allow them to start peeling back those layers with the horses. And horses will actually seek out the ones that are struggling the most. They have this inner sense of we're all prey animals when we get into these types of incidents. We come out of that with that kind of heightened sense of awareness, which can be triggered by things. And the horses can kind of pick up on that, and they'll gravitate towards you. Sometimes you can go out there and just spend a day in the corral with them, and just let you and the horse have that nonverbal communication, and that's where the magic happens.
And it is, and I'll say, sometimes I share, and I've been on some podcasts with interviews, and I've gone into a little bit of, some things that happened to me, but just suffice it to say, there have been I've been in numerous firefights, but, which at some point I got inoculated to that as a stressor, like, oh, thank God it's just a firefight. You know, I could put up with the gunfire. The one thing that always for me, you know, was something I had to deal with were the pressure plate improvised explosive devices. And it almost felt like the entire southern part of Afghanistan was a minefield. And you just didn't know if your next 6-inch step, or if you're going to step off the path, what if that was cleared. It was like, you know, that's it for me, you know, whatever it may be. But there was one that was a complex ambush attack that involved a significant number of IEDs that went off, and you know I was involved in that, and it definitely left an impression that stayed with me, and I do have PTSD from that, maybe others that I'm not even aware of. And I probably, like a lot of people in our communities, whether they're veterans or responders, you know, I tried to deal with it at the way that we all dealt with it at that time, which was to be quiet about it. And, you know, do you seem weak in some way by sharing your experience and trying, you know, find that person? Now, certainly at some point in time, it gets to a point, you know, you turn to other things that you probably shouldn't, that are not going to help you out. You know, short term, it feels like, hey, this is the way I can deal with it. Everybody else is doing the same thing, so it's good, right? So I've got my best friends, Jack and Danny, and things are all good until they're not good anymore. And I definitely had that happen with me as well, and come to the realization that, you know, I'm on a very destructive path. So I dealt with that, but if I hadn't been for a couple of battle buddies that really looked out for me, you know, I probably, you know, especially at least in my career, it could have been, you know, turned out far worse. So I'm thankful for them and that battle buddy concept. That's extremely important. The second thing is that one of them is really into equine therapy. His parents have a ranch in eastern Colorado, and he's like, hey, just, you know, I'm already in the state anyway, so why don't you just come on out and spend a day with us? And I got in the corral with a mule. And I don't know if I believed all of it. You know, I'm maybe a little bit intimidated by an animal that weighs that much and might step on my foot, you know, whatever it may be. But I got in the corral and it was, just like you said, we don't have the time to talk about how it all works, but there's some kind of magic going on. Those animals, some of them are probably more tuned than others, but they can sense certain things. And you can start to see that nonverbal communication interaction between, you know, just another one of God's creatures. It's kind of amazing. So I highly recommend it. And I would say going along with Warrior's Way is to keep an eye out for you guys, because I'm sure you're going to want more support and you're going to try to branch out and get more things done.
Absolutely. And, you know, you talked briefly, but I will tell you, skeptic. No, horses don't work that way. That's not until you're able to see it yourself.
Yeah.
And you watch it and you're like, I had no idea. And so it's a neat thing to watch, a neat thing to be a part of. And, you know, that's ultimately what we want is for just to be a resource for our men and women that need those chit chats, that need those battle buddies, and for us to just be there for them in any way we can. So
Yeah,
that's ultimately
it's
the goal.
a very valuable resource, and it's very noble too, I think. And I know that my battle buddy, I can't name him because he's still in the community, so I can't draw attention to him, but I know when he gets a chance to listen to this and watch it, he's going to be shaking his head, smiling up and down, saying, yep, told you. So I want to thank you both for being on. I know that we're just getting to know each other, but I hope we're going to, you know, stay in touch and do a lot of other great things together. There's a lot of important work that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
So thanks again for being here at the conference, for what you're putting out through ALERRT, and thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good luck.